Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Catchin Up. I'm your host, Jack Smith, joined today by Anthony Sanguinetti, a now senior pitcher for the Midi men's baseball team. Anthony, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Of course, man. Well, I kind of wanted to start back in your sophomore year. Obviously, you were, called up to varsity in the middle of the season. Can you describe that moment and kind of what it meant to you to hear that?
Yeah, so all season I'd been pitching good, and then I kind of just thought it would just be a normal sophomore playing on JV. And then I was going into the locker room one morning to go to strength class, and then Coach Aki calls me into his office before school and had me sit down and was talking with me and basically said he wanted me to come up and pitch for the varsity team.
How'd that make you feel?
I was a little nervous at first because, it's a big jump going from JV to varsity, but overall I was pretty excited and just felt tons of joy to be able to go up at such a young point in my career, I guess.
Yeah, and then if I'm not mistaken, you were tasked to pitch really early after being called up, right?
Yeah, so they were kind of low on pitching, and they were going into a tournament where it was 4 games in 4 days, so they needed me to eat up some innings. And so I pitched the very first game of that tournament, where it was basically win and go home, and that was pretty intense for me. So, but I pitched really good, and then kind of just carried over, and they had confidence in me to pitch the rest of the season.
How were you able to, fight off the nerves and be able to pitch well in that first game?
So the first batter I walked on 4 pitches, and then it took Joe York coming over to me and just saying, "Just be you. Don't try and do anything special." And those seniors on that team were pretty special, and how embracing they were of me. They were so kind, and they just made everything so much better because of how great they were and how in control of the game they seemed to be. So it allowed me to do my job.
Yeah. How did you carry that on through the rest of the season?
I'd say that as I got to know them better personally, it just allowed me to feel more comfortable and realize I don't have to do too much because they all have my back. I can pitch and know that they're all gonna make great plays behind me as defenders, and then they're gonna hit and score a bunch of runs. So all I have to focus on is just throwing strikes. So it's pretty easy for me.
Mm-hmm. And then that season culminated. You guys went to the CCS title game. What did that game mean to you, and how did it affect you? Obviously, it wasn't exactly the outcome you guys wanted, but how did that affect you kind of watching that game?
So that game was really just it was great for me to see what we could be because I knew as a sophomore that we'd hopefully have more opportunities to reach that position. And then seeing us lose, yeah, it was hard, but it also taught me what we have to do to get to that point where we win. And so
what was that? What do you have to do?
So we honestly played a pretty great game against Valley. And I think that to win, we honestly just needed to put more pressure on their pitcher from an offensive standpoint, which is putting more balls in play, which we normally do pretty good, but their pitcher who went to Cal is pretty dominant pitcher. So overall, we just needed to put up a little bit more of a fight. And then our pitcher for us, Dom Quinones, who had a fantastic year, he battled all throughout the game through 6 innings of just only giving up 2 runs. So from a defensive and pitching standpoint, I feel that we did great that game against a very potent Valley Christian offense.
Yeah, so now that you know what the team needed to do, how does that bring in you? How do you factor into that? And what did you do kind of over that off season now that you knew what you had to do to kind of get back to that spot and come out with a win?
So for me, I just was really focused because I'm a pitcher. So I was really focused on watching what Dom did to find success against that Valley Christian team. And for him, he didn't throw like 90 miles an hour or anything like that. He was kind of similar to me as a pitcher, which is where he just hit his spots and mix in off speed pitches to keep them off balance. So that's just what I uh, took from him, is that you don't need to throw 90 miles an hour to get high school batters out, as long as you're locating like 3 or 4 different pitches in any count that you want.
Yeah, and then after all that preparation, unfortunately, your season gets canceled, due to the unfortunate circumstances. How did that make you feel, and how did you respond to that?
That was pretty tough for us, considering were going into the season thinking that we'd have a very high chance to win CCS, and we even started off the season 5-0. And one of our last games was against Valley Christian in the Wilcox tournament, where we beat them 5 or 6-2. And so that we were just riding high on that after beating them pretty well. And then it just all fell apart because of COVID, but it kind of crushed. I mean, we all had hope, I guess, that the pandemic would be over pretty soon and maybe we'd get the end of our season. But as it went on and we kind of began to see that we wouldn't be going back to school and that there would be no baseball season, it was pretty heartbreaking. And so I feel like a lot of us kind of just gave up on the season and then just started focusing on next season. And for me, I kind of I didn't really pick up a baseball for a while, knowing that the season was over. So I was kind of out of shape a little, I guess. But then come like May and June, I realized that I couldn't just let myself get out of shape. So I started working out more and getting back into a baseball shape because I had travel ball and like couldn't really just be out of shape for that.
What inside you sparked you to, get back into shape and pick yourself up a little bit?
I guess it was just seeing how low I'd fallen after being so heartbroken that the season had ended, and kind of just chilling and doing nothing but homework and video games. I was like, what am I doing? Like, this isn't me.
And then, so obviously you say kind of focusing on the next season. What have you been doing? Have you been able to get onto a field, onto a mound? What have you been able to do this off season?
Yeah. So in June, I wasn't really able to get onto a field or anything, but June I dedicated just working out and getting stronger and rebuilding my strength. And I even have put on 15 pounds over the summer. So that was big for me, and it's taken my fastball velocity up quite a bit. So that was big for me. And then end of June and July, Coach Yaki was having a couple of open fields out at Midi, which was like, it wasn't really working on specific skills. It was more of just a fun environment over summer to rekindle some chemistry with other teammates. And then my travel season started in the end of August. So I really started picking up my pitching and throwing routine in beginning of August and throwing long toss and throwing some bullpen so that my arm was ready to pitch for a travel team. And then for that, we've had practices and scrimmages pretty much every weekend since late August. And then we went to Iowa a couple of weekends ago where we competed in a tournament. And then we're going to Arizona in a couple of weeks as well.
And so obviously, after that CCS title run, you guys wanted to make it back last year, but unfortunately it couldn't happen. Now you're one of the few remaining players that, was able to be on that, to get that opportunity. What are you doing to foster that feeling into your teammates now? And how are you trying to translate that feeling that you lost last year into this season?
Yeah, so last season, I didn't feel like I needed to take as much as a leadership role because of the seniors we had last year, Nick York, Andrew Vo, some of them. They were great leaders, and so they kind of took on that leadership role. But being one of the few seniors that was on that team when we were sophomores, I feel that I need to take more of a leadership role. So I've kind of grown into that leadership role, which is where I used to be a little bit standoff. I wasn't really a leader, but now I see that people like the other seniors look up to me because I was on that team, so they know that I know what it takes to reach that great level we were at.
And then what have you done to take advantage of that position? What have you done to kind of move with that?
So we haven't really been able to be in person with like as a group, but Coach Yockey's held some online Zoom meetings, and in those meetings I feel like I've spoken in front of, like, he has meetings with the entire program, so in those meetings he asks seniors to take control and speak up. So I've spoken up in a lot of those meetings. Then we go into breakout rooms with underclassmen and we just show them what Midi baseball is all about. And then in terms of my own class, I've kind of been checking up with people, asking how they're doing, if they're what they like, if they're playing for travel teams or if they're just working out and focusing on getting better themselves. So in terms of being a leader, that's what I've done during these strange and difficult times where we're not able to see each other in person.
Yeah, one thing I heard you talk about is Midi baseball. To you, what is Midi baseball? I kind of want to hear, your definition of that, because obviously you want to teach it. What is it to you?
For me, it's like a family where everyone knows everyone so well and so personally, and everyone has a love for one another, which allows us to really play at such a great level because we know everyone will do their part to the best of their ability. And it's a family and also a brotherhood as well, where you like, this is what Coach Harper would say. He said, "You're your brother's own keeper," which is sort of like you trust in your brothers and they trust in you. It's kind of like a chain where each chain is just as strong as the weakest link, I guess you could say.
And then before we wrap up, is there anything last that you want to touch on? It could be your personal story. It could be going into this season, what you've been able to do this off season. Anything that before we wrap up you want to touch on?
Um, I'd say that going into the season, we have another great shot of winning the CCS title, and that we're going to be just as great. And for us, it's going to be all about um, getting back into that midi baseball type of environment where we're fast paced, we're upbeat, our energy is always just radiating, and you can feel it from the stands. Where other teams and other people will be like, "Wow, I want to play that type of baseball because it looks fun."
Well, I mean, I'm sure you'll be right at the head of that. But thank you, Anthony, for joining us. If any of you guys viewers didn't see the first episode, we caught up with Arish Bandal. We'll link it right here. But thank you so much, Anthony, for joining us.
Yeah, of course.